If you want it, do something about it. That is a story that defines Joe Caulfield. From his time in sprint football to his time as a nurse, playing lacrosse in Ireland to finally making it to Air Force in Wyoming, the twists and turns that brought him to Laramie are about persistence, determination, and doing something. Lessons from today's podcast for anyone that wants to do anything, whether in scouting or outside of scouting. It is quite simple. Do something. All of that and more today on Scouting the League. Everyone, and welcome to Scouting the League, a fascinating journey to be discussed today with Associate AD and for football operations and GM for the Wyoming Cowboy Football program, Joe Caulfield. We will get there soon. First, though, if you have not caught up on all things Scouting the League, make sure you do so. We are now a daily podcast with short-form episodes 4 days a week and to our long format Wednesday episode. Today's, of course, on Monday, it was Why Scouts Matter. Tuesday, Scouting Hierarchy. Tomorrow will all be about the supplemental draft and competition levels. And what I'm really excited to introduce will be the audio overview of Neil Stratton's Inside the League Friday Wrap. Every episode will have something if you love scouting, are interested in scouting, or just want to keep a lay of the land in the football world. You can find every episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or check them out on our new home at profootballinsiders.com. Excited to be a part of this new spot dedicated to great football content. While you're checking everything out, make sure you like, subscribe, share this podcast wherever you are listening and watching. Share it with a friend, because I know if you are listening, you probably have a friend who loves ball as well. Head over to X, give us a follow. I am Rodrik David, former NFL scout, still consultant to all in the football world. I am at RightStepADV, my website, rsafootball.com. My co-host, Neil Stratton, you can find him at Inside the League on X or InsideTheLeague.com. His blog, SucceedInFootball.com, is also a must-read. Make sure you go follow Pro Football Insiders as well on X. They are at pro_FB_insiders. But enough of that. The journey with today's guest, Joe Caulfield, is not a linear one. Multiple timelines, many job roles, all that he squeezed into a day, making the football journey. It kind of makes me wonder if he had a time machine or figured out this multiverse thing. From Princeton to North Dakota, nursing, lacrosse, Ireland, Air Force, so much more. But enough from me. Let's hear it from the man himself, Joe Caulfield, Associate Athletics Director for Football Operations and General Manager for the Wyoming Cowboy Football program.
All right, so this week we welcome Joe Caulfield to the podcast. Joe's got a very interesting story. He is I think primarily one of persistence and being rewarded for going hard and never quitting on yourself and believing in yourself and all those kind of bromides that we hear so often, but we don't always follow. Joe is the GM at the University of Wyoming, but there's a whole lot more to his title and his job there, and of course his story. Joe, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us on the Scouting the League podcast, buddy.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
All right, so when you look at Joe's, everyone that's listening, I encourage you to check out Joe's LinkedIn. You're not going to find a LinkedIn like Joe's anywhere, really. And I'm not just saying that. He's got an incredible story. But I want you to tell it, Joe. Kind of tell us a little bit about how you got here, touch on as many things as you think are relevant, and also just kind of with a little bit of a focus on who's helped you along the way, because that's a big part of our focus here at Scouting the League.
Sure. For better or worse, it probably is a unique path to have gotten here. It's funny, I think of my interview last year with Air Force. That was probably the first time someone really delved into wait a minute, these timelines don't work. I had to kind of explain that, in life, you have all different things happening. So you have one timeline doing this and another doing this, etc. For a lot of people, it's nice and linear. You work for a football team in college, you do this, maybe you play, you take steps after that. So when I went to college, I started out playing lacrosse for 2 years at Haverford College. I was deciding between University of Pennsylvania and Haverford Penn to play sprint football or lacrosse at Haverford. And, love sports, never hit the growth spurt that I thought was coming. So that kind of dictated what I was able to do. Uh, Enjoyed playing lacrosse at Haverford, but the experience was a little bit different. So I really missed football, if we're going to be honest, and decided between Haverford and Penn. They're both pretty good schools. So I said, all right, I'm going to explore transferring before transfer portal was a thing. Transfer into Penn, and I start playing sprint football. A lot of people probably don't even know what sprint football is. It's basically lightweight football in college. You have to weigh in, full 11 on 11, varsity sport. It's not an NCAA, but most schools treat them as if they are, regular athletes in the athletic department. So I
Now,
found
Joe,
out
was
about
that
church,
when
ironically.
I was at Navy? Joe, when I was at Navy, that was called 150s. Is it
Yep.
still 150 is your limit, or have they raised that up?
No, as Americans have grown, sprint football's limit has grown too. So when I played, it was 165.9 2 days before the game.
Okay.
I believe now it's up to 182 or 176, depending on hydration testing.
Okay.
But ironically, the guy that I found out about it was one of our assistant coaches who probably weighed 350 pounds. I saw him at church wearing a Penn sprint football shirt, and I was like, what the hell is sprint football? And then it's just kind of ironic. But I did that for 2 years, and at that time, the league was very small. It was just Penn, Princeton, Cornell, Army, and Navy. Since then, it has since expanded in different ways. Some schools, it's a little bit weird. The time we're in with rev share and all this, like places are talking about cutting sports. Well, some of these schools actually added sprint football because they thought that was a way to get a bunch of kids paying tuition. So you get schools like Mansfield University in Pennsylvania, Chestnut Hill College, Pennsylvania, Caldwell University, a couple other schools. I think they're up to about 9 now, because they get roster of 54 kids that are paying full tuition, and they're going to be good alumni. It's just not as expensive as a regular fat boy team, as we call it. But while I was in college, I also started seeing the opportunity to play lacrosse for Ireland. And I knew that I had the chance to get citizenship. So while at Penn, I applied for citizenship. My uncle Jimmy had done all the paperwork, so all they needed to do was apply. And I wound up playing in a bunch of tournaments over in Europe: 2004 European Championships, '05 Celtic Cup, '06 World Lacrosse Championships for field in Canada, a couple indoor championships. And it sounds cool, and it was an awesome experience, but it's probably a little bit more like Cool Runnings and the Jamaican bobsled team than the Olympics level. We'll see, because lacrosse is actually going to be demoing in the Olympics next year. We'll see how that changes for a little bit. A lot of the teams wind up being Americans looking to just hang on to the dream. And, maybe I was that too, but I actually lived over there for a while and helped coach and help really try to develop. And it's kind of cool. Some of my best friends are kids from that team where we started at University College Dublin in 2005, and we handed them their first stick. But that was sort of like a diversion. I knew that I was probably going to go into medicine or something like that. And as I got closer, I realized, like, okay, maybe I spent a little bit too much time either coaching lacrosse or playing sports in college. I didn't have the GPA. I would have to do something different. So that led, and shoot, I don't even know if this is on my LinkedIn, but in 2005, I wound up moving out to Malibu, and I lived in a pool house, and I coached lacrosse at Malibu High School while taking night classes at or UCLA Extension. And I had some opportunities to coach Division III lacrosse, get my foot in the door. But at that time, I did not have the ability to take a $4,000 full-time job or a $10,000 job that was full-time. I just didn't have that luxury. There is a certain amount of privilege that comes with doing those things. Or, as later in my story, you're older and you make decisions to set yourself up to be able to do that. So, I was kind of deciding med school, nursing, what am I going to do? And fell on nursing while doing some lacrosse stuff. I worked for a lacrosse magazine as a writer and photographer, just sort of doing stuff on the side that I enjoyed, trying to figure out ways to make ends meet before going into nursing. Started that. I became a full-time nurse in 2009. And, you become an adult and you're supposed to do these adult things to provide and whatever. And you start doing them. You make some decisions in it. Maybe you don't love this part or that part. You find some other areas. And I kept doing that in nursing a couple years here, switched to something else. Like, I started out working at the bedside in the intensive care unit. Then I moved into something else called case management, some different roles. And I miss sports. I helped coach my little sister's lacrosse team. She had a fun college career. Was able to follow that. And then, there were wasn't anything there. So I started helping out a little bit with Penn Sprint Football, doing some video stuff, very part-time, but it, it scratched the itch a little bit. And then as we went further along, I was like, I'm missing something. So I really want to see if I can figure out a way to make this feasible. And one of the questions you'd asked before was talking about Princeton and sprint football. So that led to, you're getting older and you only have one chance to do this stuff. So I said, all right, if I'm going to do this, how do I make it feasible? I can't just quit lucrative career, but I could do that and also, figure out ways to take steps. So I was very intentional, and I saw that Princeton, they had a new coach, a guy named Sean Morey. He played several years in the NFL, maybe 9 or 10 seasons. He was all-time leading receiver from Brown, and he had a very sort of Rudy type NFL career, very successful. He wound up, finishing up his career, retiring. His wife was Princeton's hockey coach, so they said, hey, we have this sprint football team that no one cares about. We don't support. There's a lot of money in the bank from all the rich alumni, but we don't really know what to do with it. Do you want to coach it? So he started coaching, and, they hadn't won a game since 1999, literally. So I saw that and I was like, a guy like this, I don't know him. He probably needs help, and he's probably got decent connections. Worst case, like something to do. So I reached out to him, and we hit it off. We tried to do some things there, and it was a weird year because they wound up actually canceling the program after the season. And like our last game was like a storybook. I don't know. We have an hour, so I probably have some time to fill.
We got plenty of time to tell it. Tell the storybook.
Before you dig into that, though, Joe, did you switch coasts to go volunteer with this 150s team? Because at last we heard you were in Malibu.
Oh, that's a long time ago. Again, the timelines. Okay. So Malibu was only 7 months. Yeah, we should probably have someone build a timeline to run along to follow where it was. Because so 2005, I was in Malibu, and then when that wrapped up towards the end of the summer, I wound up going over to Ireland for a little while in between jobs. 2006, had a full-time job with Lax.com, Lacrosse stuff. I was back in Philly, and was playing for Ireland, working towards a nursing school. Had to take a class and the World Championships in 2006, and then 2000. So I took like a community college course. 2007, I actually wound up starting nursing school at Boston College. So I was there for one semester when Matt Ryan got them up to number 2. And it wasn't the right fit for a program. So I actually wound up transferring to a school back in Philadelphia, Jefferson, which ironically, DeBrickashaw Ferguson just graduated nursing school from that program. So if anyone has a contact for him, I'd like to reach out to him, give him some nursing advice. But so it is very hard to follow the timeline. But so nursing school, graduated in 2009, and then I was working. Graduated nursing school. Everyone says, "Oh, you'll never have trouble finding a job." Well, we did. We were coming out of the recession, so I wound up going. My first job was in Cleveland at the Cleveland Clinic. Was there for a year, got great experience, and I had an opportunity to move back home to Philadelphia. Wound up being at Jefferson for a couple years full time, switching over to Penn, doing the case management stuff, different stuff. Stayed part time at Jefferson for a long time. Which is also a theme. Maybe I have trouble cutting ties. I wind up keeping part-time stuff here and there. But anyway, so that takes us to 2015. They hadn't won a game since literally 1999. And there was a new team in the league, Chestnut Hill College, but Chestnut Hill was pretty good. Like talked about these kids, like Princeton got no help getting players in. So those kids had to get in on their own, be decent at football, and under the time 172 pounds. So they're kind of unicorns around. So Sean, we would walk around campus and try to find kids like, hey, have you heard of football? Would you be interested in playing? Whereas Army and Navy, they would have 200 kids come out for tryouts because they got out of some military requirements. And, so they got some good players. And Chestnut Hill was a similar thing. They got a couple all-league kids from around Philadelphia who they were all league nose guards at 175 pounds in public leagues or whatever. We didn't have that. Like our starting, I forget if he was a left or right tackle, he had not played a football game since middle school. So now he's starting both offense and defensive line. Played as hard as he could, but it's just a different world. In any case, that that the last game that Princeton ever had was literally like a Bad News Bears type storybook ending. And the only so we get to the game. We're playing in Princeton Stadium. It's the last game of the season. We're 0-5 or 6 or whatever it was. No one really cares. Like, to the point where the university assigned the PA announcer to go do like swimming or something. So we have no PA announcer. And I text my buddy from high school who is a PhD in biochemistry. He Anthony Ambrosini. And I was like, hey, I need you. Get over to the stadium. Like, you're going to come to the game anyway. I was like, you're going to go announce. I laughed because I set my wife up there. And so she knows of football. You know, she would cheer at the games at Pitt. And so they were our PA announcers for this game. And she's there. Like, Tony was quiet. You know, he's a sciencey guy, but like, he knows football. We're in fantasy football leagues together. And she's just like babbling. Well, it looks like a first, you know, saying whatever. And I'm hearing this like on the sidelines. Like, I was doing a lot of different things, whether it was ops or taking pictures. And she would just say things like, well, that should have been a first down, but wasn't. So then I'd have to text Tony to be like, hey, tell Morgan to calm down a little bit. And no lie, it gets to the point where we're tied. I forget if it was 36-36. Our best player was our quarterback. This kid played, you know, did the best he could, Chad Cowden. And we're going in driving. Again, this was the nerdy Princeton University, and it was to the point where, like, the campus, again, like a movie, people started saying, like, hey, sprint football might win. People are streaming into the stadium because they think this is going to be the first win in 15 years. And so we're driving inside the 10. And again, like, we don't fault Chad because he played his heart out. He I don't even remember what the play call was, but it was basically where, like, he's not doing anything except holding onto the ball, and he goes to run and he fumbles. It bounces up into a defensive lineman's hands, and he runs 90 plus yards the other way for a touchdown with under 2 minutes to go. And we're just like, and you know, we're all hard, and I hear over the loudspeaker, my wife goes, holy shit. And I'm just like, oh my God. And so, you know, kids were heartbroken. Like, they really tried. It was pretty cool, like a cool experience, even with that. And I think Sean probably saw the writing on the wall. They canceled the program in April. They just said, hey, we're not doing this anymore. So they had, like, you know, over $1 million in some budget that just got reabsorbed. They tried to have a flag football team for a little bit because it wasn't a cause. Like, those kids graduated and they become doctors, lawyers, senators. You know, I don't know if you guys have a fact checker on this podcast. Like, Joe Rogan asked for Jamie to check this, but I think, like, Robert Kraft played at Columbia. Jimmy Carter played briefly at some point. Like, those are the types of people that are in this league, not, you know, they become agents. They own teams.
We're going to take your word for that on the fact check.
Yeah.
Our fact check is out today, Joe, unfortunately.
But yeah, that was so they canceled the program. So I'm like, all right, now I have like a taste of this. Like, this is really something I want to do. And that led into reaching out to my buddy John Connors from St. Joe's. He was 2 years younger than St. Joe's Prep in Philly. 2 years younger than me. At that point, St. Joe's had won 2 or 3 state titles. And then, you know, we were decent when I was in high school. Not that I contributed all that much to it as a 5'6" right guard and middle linebacker. But, you know, so I stayed in touch with John. He was 2 years younger than me. He had played at Harvard. And I was like, hey, you know, I did this. I'm really looking to make this a career. I don't know what to do. Do you think the prep has any opportunities? So I met with Coach Gabe Infante, and he was the head coach, not DC. But he kind of was the linebackers coach. And he's like, look, I just need someone to help me when I got to go do other stuff. And, you know, we started from there. Very grateful for the opportunity. That 2016 team, our senior class had DeAndre Swift, a bunch of other kids that wound up going playing high-level FCS, a couple FBS kids, and awesome opportunity. I was there for 3 out of 4 state titles. We lost. The other one we lost, and the one we lost was to why am I drawing a blank on their name? The Pine Richland, the quarterback Phil Jerkovich, who had a long college career that was very up and down, but like we played on a snowy field, lost to a kid like that. So it was a great experience. I had the opportunity to coach some really good kids, a lot of like Ivy League level kids, not sprint football. You know, I got to coach with Jeremiah Trotter, coach his son. You know, I say coach. Because the funny story with that, like one of the first days that Jeremiah Trotter, who's now on junior, is now on the Eagles. He showed up kind of like midsummer, maybe a little bit later, and the way the field was set up was there's a sideline, there's a fence maybe 10 yards away, and all the parents stood behind it. Well, Jeremiah Sr. kept coming in between and be like, "Hey, coach, tell him this." I was like, "Sir, with all due respect, just tell them yourself. They don't want to hear it from me." So he just started coaching with us, which, some guys are probably whatever. We had a great experience. And that was a guy that, like, I got to wear his jersey when I was in college. Like, I was superstitious about it. The Eagles game, I'd have to have the Jeremiah Trotter jersey on before the game started or they would lose. And then he left for the Redskins, and there's this guy, Terrell Harrison from Notre Dame, who I replaced it in tape. And then, I got to be coaching with him, and I told him that one day. He's like, "Oh, would you change it to Joker?" Jeremiah Trotter Sr. doesn't really curse much, so it's kind of funny. But great opportunity, cool experience. And so while doing that, again, the timelines, practice would be 4 to 6, 4 to 7-ish. And I was working in the emergency department at University of Pennsylvania Hospital doing case management. That would be 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And then I also decided to sign up for an MBA through the University of North Dakota, which comes in later.
Why not?
Yeah.
You probably had time, you're going to the bathroom. At least you can study while you're on the toilet, right? I mean, This is amazing, Joe. And I think we all have our hard scrabble stories, but it's really remarkable how you're able to pull this off, given the fact that there are still 24 hours in a day for it, But hope this is inspirational to people that are listening.
Yeah. And, like I said earlier, when I had those opportunities in 2005, when I'm out of college to go coach, I didn't have the safety net to say, okay, I can take a $10,000 an hour job. Talking to the coach, I'm like, all right, well, I need to live. When can I find time to work whatever job just to make ends meet? And he's like, well, you can't. And I had a couple of friends that at that time were successful in moving into coaching, and they had a safety net. Their parents would bail them out, rent here. And I'm not knocking that. Like, everyone has their own path. It's just now when I was older, I was able to say, like, this is something that I really want to do, and this is how I'm going to figure out a way to do it, getting the experience while having a decent job. And then so that led to 2020, where it was a bit of a transition. I thought that I was going to have an opportunity to do an operations internship with Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And that was actually through a Sprint football connection, who Dan Malasky was a kicker that was before me at Sprint, because it's such a small community. People really look out for each other. He was the lawyer at the time for the Buccaneers, and he put me in touch with a guy, Mike Greenberg, who I think he's now the assistant GM. Mike didn't know me from anyone, but because Dan reached out to him and I was an Ivy League guy, Mike went to Cornell. We thought, he got me in touch with the ops guys, and I thought I was going to have this, very low level internship opportunity. Well, COVID hits, so I graduate in December. I have a couple months there where I was doing the things that I think I went to the Senior Bowl that year, would have gone to the Combine. So that brings us up into March, and I'm doing these part-time jobs. Like, I had a job with Jefferson working at nights, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 nights a week, the ICU caring for patients. I had this other part-time job with case management, like a managed Medicaid company. And, those were ways I was able to support it. Like, if I didn't have those jobs, how do you afford just flying down to the Senior Bowl or whatever? And so COVID hits mid-March, and we're going towards the end of the month, and they started rolling out these travel nurse opportunities. And one of them, $5,000 a week. Like, that's not life-changing money to everyone, but to me, that was pretty enticing. So Tampa Bay is like, hey, look, we don't know what's happening. Everything's on pause. All the NFL teams got sent home. And I told my wife, I was like, look, I can't really pass this up. I have these part-time jobs now. They're paying decent, but $45 an hour is a lot different than $5,000 a week. And so I said, look, I'm going to sign a 1-month contract, go up to Salem, Massachusetts. Did that. 1 month turned into 2 months, turned into 3 months. And then we're getting into June of 2020, and training camps are going to start. The NFL still didn't know what was going to happen. I said, all right. And they were also sort of getting ready to cut hours, because I don't know if you guys really remember, but COVID, with the spikes, they kind of lagged in the hospitals. So spike, and a week later, they would have all these travel nurses get shipped somewhere. And then when they got control of it, they would get rid of them because they didn't need them anymore. So it was kind of coinciding with that. I go home and Tampa's like, hey, look, they just came out with these tier restrictions and we're not going to be able to take any interns. So I had been doing all these letters, all these different things. And this guy, Chuck Peterson, I forget his role with the Vikings. It's something like director of team operations, but he's not a DFO. He didn't even, I met him last year, nice guy. He didn't even remember telling me this, but he's like, hey, what I would do if I were you is reach out to all of the infection control officers. So I went in, I got my Excel list of all the, who were usually the athletic trainers. I got all of the athletic trainers. I made a form email, sent it out to all of them, except for maybe 2 teams. I couldn't find the guy. And that was probably the best thing I ever did. I was trying to market myself as a nurse that knows football. And, I talked to about 3 or 4 teams on the phone from it. A couple others were like, we wish we spoke to you last week because we just decided to make a nutritionist do this or whoever. Washington had an interview and they said, hey, look, we'd love to bring you on as an infection control officer. Got a little bit lucky because they had some late sort of turnover that Ron Rivera's first year and that summer. And I think that cut some of the people in their tier restrictions, like their tier level. So they said, oh, yeah, come on down. It wasn't really much of a risk for them, $12 an hour intern, and went down. And at the time, my wife, who's also a nurse, very supportive of all of these things, even though, maybe during all these different steps, it's hard to see the forest for the trees or whatever the expression is. And so she was super loyal to her hospital, and COVID made people do a lot of crazy things. And one of the things that her hospital system did was they just decided to fire all middle management. So she goes in one day, she'd been working her butt off, like her floor was overrun by COVID, but because the hospital systems didn't have money coming in with surgeries, they said, this is how we're going to deal with it. We'll just get rid of all these people. So all of a sudden now she was a free agent too. I was like, let's go down to Virginia. We'll figure this out. We lived in a residence inn for a month. And then because we have 2 dogs, 2 pit bulls, it's hard to find places. Ashburn's expensive. We wound up renting in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, which was pretty cool, but had like a 55-minute commute. And yeah, we had a very interesting year and we wound up winning the division. And yeah, but
That's amazing.
Then towards the end of I don't know, I guess I'll just keep going with my timeline.
Now, Joe, before we keep going, because we're going to get to the, you were part of, something that Neil was integral with this CGSU class for aspiring scouts. That piece with your wife, again, it's one of the things that, the aspiring scouts that I talk to as part of the scouting community, a lot of them ask, like, all right, well, again, the going theory is like, I've got to be under 30. And if I'm single, it's a big bonus. Again, you are mobile. You really don't have a whole lot of other concerns to worry about. Again, a lot of young men can sleep on a mattress, sleep on a futon, sleep on some hard concrete just to get the chance in football. But you've, at this point, been with your wife or girlfriend, whatever she was, all through this timeline. Talk about the challenges, again, the good things that come with having that support system of somebody that understands it. Obviously, being a similar field as, in the nursing field with you, again, understanding that piece of it. But again, football is such a different world when it comes to, again, just everything, the way it operates, both the schedule and then again, the way you get jobs, all that kind of stuff. Talk about that piece of having a wife kind of all through this process and what that meant.
Yeah. So we actually didn't get married until 2019. We met 2013, we met at the hospital. I was doing something else on her floor and hit it off. And I joke with her that, or it wasn't really a joke, but like, this was something I'm serious about, and it's not a passing phase. It's not like, hey, I love fantasy football, and this is what I enjoyed that at the time too. But like, I wanted to turn this into something more. So I think I made we had a very short engagement, but I think I kept pushing that out to be like, no, like this is seriously something that's happening. If you're on board with it, great. Like we'll figure it out. And I think, in some respects, like being older made it a challenge. There are certain teams that won't even consider me. I know, and I don't want to throw them under the bus, but I heard from a team that I should have had a very good in with that when they had their DFO position open, the head coach wouldn't even consider me because I had a wife or I didn't have a kid at the time because I had a wife. And I said, that's pretty ridiculous. And by that point, I was already doing that job for a higher level FCS team than they were. So there are those things out there. And, I wouldn't have been able to do this without a supportive wife. I think I had to prove to her a little bit that this was something sustainable and that it wasn't just like, so it's a challenge to make it sustainable and like get to a point where it can become that. And I think I was lucky in the sense to have my different background because that provided some of the financial stability to do it. Like those checks from the travel nursing, like I could take a $12 an hour internship job to live in or near the most expensive county in the country. And that part of that was there's luck and timing and also intentionality to it. While also doing that, I had a job with a managed Medicaid company doing chart reviews. So like I would do 10 to 20 hours a week where I get paid $45 an hour, and I'm doing those at 8 p.m. to midnight. When I worked in North Dakota, a similar thing that like, there's luck involved with that, but also like I chose that path and I set it up so that I'd have that ability to survive, because you can't last that long on $12. And I didn't want it to be her burden to have to bail me out. And I think, she's very, very supportive about each step, but there was an element of having to show and prove to me and her that like, hey, we want to do these things as a family, and these are things I want to do individually. And, to be honest, like that also led into us, family planning a little bit. And we had very honest conversations. I was like, hey, I would like to have a child at some point, but I don't want to be bitter to have not pursued what I want to pursue to the full extent or have that change that plan. And, there are people whose lives get changed by having children at certain points, and we have a lot of control over that. And I think sometimes people forget that and don't take ownership of it necessarily.
Yep.
So, I could have had a kid at 24 and that would have affected the ability to make different decisions.
Yeah, certainly.
Now, Joe, if I'm doing my math correct, you were at North Dakota as the DPP when you had you have 2 children under 3, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
I have 2.5-year-old Leighton girl and 2-month-old boy, JJ.
Okay. And so do you feel like that you were at a point at North Dakota where you felt like we've achieved some measure of stability here? Maybe now's the time? Was it kind of a conscious decision like that, or did it just happen?
It was definitely conscious. I actually accepted the job at North Dakota when my wife was pregnant. So we were actually apart for most of that pregnancy, because I got the job at North Dakota in August. And, we had some conversations. At that point, she was actually teaching nursing at a school and university, and she had the ability to, get paid for a summer off and all this stuff. And so when it came to the time, like she didn't want to give up that job for the year, which I completely supported. And I said, okay, well, that then means it's a year decision. It's not just a semester, because she was thinking about coming in the winter. And I'm like, well, you're going to be severely pregnant, and North Dakota winters are challenging. Right now you live near a major city. You have a support system here that's probably going to be
Where was she, Joe?
She was in Philadelphia. We
Okay.
owned a house right outside Philly. And she was teaching at a school outside of Philly, Gwen and Mercy. And, tough conversations. It wasn't easy. There was challenging times, but it was, we made these decisions, and there's a lot of maturity to it, and we've made it through the other side. But, I mean, I don't even know if I told you, Neil, that Leighton was due at the end of February, and I'd read I don't know if it was on the Football Scoop or what, but Neil Brown, the former head coach of West Virginia, he talked about, there was an article about how precise he was in his family planning, having 3 kids born within like 1 week of each other in February, like back when that was really a dead period. So in my head, like that was the time to have the kid. And, you take out a calendar and it's not hard to figure out when those things should happen to make that work. Well, I didn't know that North Dakota has like one of the earliest, or they traditionally have one of the earliest spring balls. It's basically winter practice because they practice indoor. So we were in the middle of practice, and I couldn't just be like, hey, I'm going to come home for 3 weeks for this kid. I really had to I was trying to buy all the time I could. And we were supposed to come, I don't know, it was like February 25th or 28th, something like that. And the morning of the Eagles Chiefs Super Bowl, I get a call at like 6:30 a.m. And my wife, I have my phone, she's on Do Not Disturb, or it's on Do Not Disturb, but she gets a pass. And she's like, hey, I either just wet the bed or my water broke. I was like, all right, well, I'm up now. Let's figure out if, while she's on speaker, I'm going on to American's app to figure out when the flight from Fargo is leaving. And I said, okay, there's a flight, whatever, 11:30. That'll get me back there at about 8 tonight. You need to go. And she said, well, I don't know. I was like, you need to go to the hospital now and figure out what this is. And she goes to the hospital, and, at first the nurse was like, oh, I don't think it's your water breaking, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, she shouldn't have said that. When are the results going to be? And at this point, I'm at the office getting everything backed up, getting my computer ready to go, all the files I need, because we have junior days coming up. We're in spring ball and all these things. And I'm trying to figure out what I need. And then she calls back and she's like, you need to get on that flight. I called my work study kid. I was like, hey, you want to drive me down to Fargo? I'll give you $50. And so I watched the first half of that Super Bowl from the flight. My mom picks me up and everything's going great. The Eagles are winning. And then I get to the hospital, and she's excited to see me, whatever. And I find out that we're like several hours away from the kid coming, like not anytime soon. And I was like, oh, so I can watch the second half. And yeah. But that was, and that was lucky, because North Dakota and some of these places, like winter, roads get shut down. You just can't leave for 24 hours or whatever it takes. So I got really lucky that day was very clear, and had the support of Coach Schweigert in North Dakota. He, he's like, whatever you need. And I my work ethic, like when the kid came out and we were at home, like I was doing stuff on the computer, wearing her on my chest, because she could be laying down, and there's other things I could have been doing too, like getting highlight videos ready for recruiting type stuff and those things. Yeah.
So Joe, you were part of, I think, our first CGSU class. Was that 21, Joe?
It would have been January 22, because after
Lafayette. Okay. So you weren't at North Dakota yet, correct?
No, I had finished up in Washington, did a assignment as a travel nurse with my wife, and then had the opportunity. I actually thought I was going to go to North Dakota as a volunteer. Car was like packed, ready to go, and then Lafayette came up at the last minute, and that's an hour north of Philadelphia. My wife was like, I think you should probably choose that one. And I did that, and then the January 2022 would have been that first class.
Okay. And I remember you well. I mean, obviously that's where we met. You weren't just a little older than the other kids, but you're a lot more mature. You knew what you were trying to do. You were very responsive. You were trying to turn this opportunity into something. Did it play a role at all in your success going forward? Or did you feel like it was a net positive or a net negative or a net either way, really?
I think it was absolutely a net positive. And a lot of these things on the way, you don't know where they're going to come in, where it's going to pay dividends or come into fruition. So like just with that, I would love to be on the East Coast, and grew up an Eagles fan, probably not as a fan really anymore, just to love football and love the NFL. But I got the opportunity to work directly with the Eagles. I was there to make any opportunity and any connections I could. So I also worked with like the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I knew very little about the CFL, but both of the, Lee DiValerio came through North Dakota. He's a scout for the Eagles. So it's kind of cool to have those connections. And then with the Blue Bombers, like I was able to make relationships with their assistant GMs, Danny and the guy that's on Hamilton.
Ted?
Ted? Yep. And Ted. And Kyle Walters, the GM for Blue Bombers, came through, and like that all started from that. Lots of other connections there too, just random people. Those opportunities are what you make of it, and I think maybe some people don't understand that. So for me, any chance that I had and there's a lot of trial and error with it. Like you can't just throw your resume at people. Sometimes it's just, like with the Eagles scouts, like I helped them with what they needed, and they're like, hey, we're going out to In-N-Out. So I ran out to In-N-Out with them just to have the opportunity to network. And Jared Kilburn is a scout with the Eagles. From that, we made a friendship. And, one time I reached out to him, and we wound up walking around South Philly for an hour, just sort of talking about different ways that I can maybe try to get, my foot in the door somewhere or do something. So I think there are probably people that could go to that and say, well, they didn't do anything for me. Well, it's going to be what you make out of it. And it's the same with doing all of those things. Like, you don't show up to the Senior Bowl and think you're just going to be handed a job. It's really, you have to go there and you have to, there's some intentionality about it, like figuring out how you have a connection with someone. Did you go to school with them? Did they coach a player you coached or whatever? And be strategic about it. So, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, yeah. I mean, I think that it really just presents you with an opportunity, and what comes from that is what you make of it to a certain extent.
Okay, so let's talk about Air Force and how that came about, and then let's talk about, obviously, Wyoming.
Yeah. So I was at North Dakota. I had a great 2 years there, and I had sort of a weird role, wore many hats. Coach Weigert really gave me a lot of leeway to be able to impact different things, and there's a much smaller staff there. So I was there and pretty content, but you're always looking for something a little bit bigger, it pays a little bit better. And I would look for certain things. I wasn't ready to just jump at anything, and just saw, you have all these alerts set up, and saw the Air Force thing, and I wound up just applying. And it was a long time before I heard back. And I've come to learn there's a little bit of bureaucracy that probably contributed to that. And it was a cool opportunity. I had the first Zoom. And it was funny because the first call I had was with Associate AD, I forget his title exactly, but probably Associate AD. He's since moved on to Pitt. His name is Brant Ust. He called me. It was Friday at like 7:45. I answered. Once you start trying to get jobs, you answer every single call to your phone, even if it says spam potential. And he said, Joe, Brant Ust, we'd like to interview you for the DFO position. Are you available Monday at 9? I knew that we were because it happened to be a dead time. I said, yes. He said, great. I'll send you a Zoom invite. Great. We're off the phone in like 30 seconds. So, okay, that was weird. And at the same time, I had a friend reach out to me that Buffalo had reached out to them. And I had a really good conversation with Pete Lembo the day before. And like, now you're talking about getting closer to the East Coast. And we hit it off talking about, recruiting Northeast is a little bit different than other places. And I had, I'm from there. I have a lot of familiarity with it. And it's just funny how like you go all these periods and you're not getting calls back. No one's responding to your emails. You feel like you're getting ghosted. And all of a sudden now I had two viable options at the same time. So Monday, and it's just funny to think of the timing because Coach, I think he went to one of the horse races, like the Triple Crown, maybe the Belmont or something, happened to be that weekend. And so he was not on his phone. One day I have a Zoom with Air Force. It goes well. I meet with Brant, and he was very serious. I didn't think he liked me at all. There's another guy, Lieutenant Colonel Boyd Fritchie, who now I'm pretty close with, and he was pretty serious. But and another thing, like when you go in these interviews, you do preparation. So Boyd, he had a different pathway in the Air Force. Like he worked in hospitals. So he did a rotation at the Cleveland Clinic. So I don't know any of these people. I don't know Brant. I don't know Boyd. And Ashley Ussery was also on it. And like I could, I look up all their backgrounds. Like, all right, I have to figure out a way to drop this so that like I can make a connection. And actually it was funny because at the time, and this was partly why I'd written it off. Steve Russ, who's now the DC at UAB, he was the linebackers coach with us at Washington, and we hit it off when I was there. Had a good relationship. So I reached out to him, and I felt bad because I hadn't actually reached out to him since he got let go from Washington. You don't want to just reach out to him and be like, hey, sorry you lost your job. Can you help me find a job? But I told him I was interested. He said, oh, yeah, I'll reach out to Coach Calhoun. And, he gets back to me. He's like, you don't want that job. And he goes on all these reasons why I don't. And I say, okay. And he's like, and it also sounds like they have someone. And then another friend ran into Boyd at the DFO meetings and said, yeah, they have someone. So that was why it was a little bit weird when I got these Zooms and, you do the interview and it went well. So then I was like, all right, that went well, but I thought they had someone, whatever. So then get a call later that day, Brant, hey, really enjoyed the interview today. Want to do a second interview with Coach Calhoun on Wednesday. Again, 35-second conversation. I'm like, okay, great, I'm free. When you have a job, that's often when it's easier to find a job, but how do you interview? Like I couldn't go home because I had a 1-year-old running around. You can't do it in your office. There's a lot of balancing acts. So what I actually did, I had done the MBA at UND. I had a good relationship with the business school. They have these rooms over there that you can just go use. So I go over there and interview and meet with Coach Calhoun, Boyd and Brandt, and went well. And it was funny, like I talked about the timelines, because Boyd was the only one that was like, well, how did you do this? And what about this time? And I said, all right, here, football timeline, everything else timeline, to try to make it make sense. And so then that opportunity came along, and there was a lot of positive that came out of it. We had a little bit of a rough start to the season, wound up turning it around towards the end, and they've had a lot of success there. And I think that a lot of good people, a lot of great student athletes, and there's just some challenges this year that came across with Trump, Elon, and Doge being federal employees, and Air Force is set up a little bit different than Army and Navy. There's a lot of federal employees in athletic departments, so they're looked at a little bit differently, right, wrong, or indifferent. Excuse me a second. And so I actually wound up accepting the deferred resignation program from them when the Wyoming opportunity came along, and here we are.
Well, this may rub a little bit of salt in any wound that Neil has, but bar none, the best college game day atmosphere is the Air Force Academy.
Wow.
With the walk-ins and the flyovers. You're getting 10 groups of, again, whatever, if they're fighters, cargo, Black Hawk, whatever it is. Again, I've been to a good number of college games across every level, multiple Air Force games. Again, I have to, if you're ever in Colorado, you've got to go to an Air Force Academy game. Sorry, Neil, I haven't been to a game at Navy yet, so again, maybe I can't speak to that. I've talked to people who would agree with me that have been to both, so I'm going to stand there. Joe, maybe you can agree with me and we can beat up Neil on this podcast. Air Force, better game day experience than Navy. You got to give me some yes.
I have not been to a Navy game day other than sprint football, where we played in front of 47 friends and family in Navy Marine Corps Stadium, which was a great experience, but a little bit different.
Yeah. Joe, you've been in a bunch of different spots, football-wise, again, business-wise, nursing-wise. What are we talk about from a scouting standpoint, the traits all the time, traits of players. We want speed, explosion. There are traits of scouts, traits of operation, traits of, again, whatever you're going to be doing in your role. What are the traits, no matter what you're doing, if I want to make it in the game of football, do these things? Networking, obviously, again, there's some of them that just go kind of, you expect work ethic, networking, whatever. What are the things, if you're talking to people out there like, hey, have these traits if you want to make it in the game of football, or really just in the game of life?
Yeah, I mean, you can talk about the kind of basic stuff. I think that's one of the challenges with this profession, right? That there's no nursing certification. There's no certification you take that says, hey, he's a competent scout. It's whether that person believes you are that to them. And that's something that I think is a little bit challenging for people to wrap their head around. Like, you can be completely right, but it doesn't matter if someone else doesn't care about your opinion. So I think for me, that was something that was hard to learn. And, there's different, everyone has a different path too. So when you're younger, you can take some different opportunity. You always hear like, be where your feet are and these things. And there's an art to that you have to do the best you can with where you are. But also you don't necessarily want people that are complacent with their current, like, as you work your way up, like at some point you reach the highest pinnacle and whatever. I think for me, a lot of it was, since so much of this is so subjective, being able to figure out what other people want and figuring out a way to get it done or what they need. So like little things like at North Dakota, there's not a lot of resources. We didn't have a full-time video guy. It was a GA and me splitting it up with a position coach. So how do we try to recruit against NDSU, some of these teams that are winning championships with a little bit more resources, and then you try to compete against schools like Minnesota and Nebraska. How do you steal a recruit from there? And you have to figure out ways to make that experience special and a little bit different. And okay, maybe I don't have the best skills at Photoshop, but I could figure it out a little bit. And, I talked about like when I had my daughter, one of the things I was doing at home, and it was almost like good to do it. I took all the TV copies off of our catapult and I turned them into game highlights. So now when kids came into our indoor facility for junior days or whatever, we could have highlights playing, and it's 7 minutes of highlights of a victory, and I don't have to do any sounds or any special effects. I just let the announcers talk about it. If it's a touchdown, like, it sounds kind of cool. And like little things like that, be willing to think outside of the box. One of the other things in North Dakota that I had to do was the coaches used a Google Sheet in 2022 and 2023. That was their database for recruiting. So I was a little bit behind. We didn't have teamworks. We didn't have arms yet. So I had to figure out ways to make the communication a little bit better so that we could evaluate more kids to get better. I wound up paying a kid off of a site called Fiverr to help me code a database system. And that required like the understanding of like, hey, this is what they need. How can I help figure it out? We're not going to commit to $50,000 for ARMS database right now. But do you just throw your hands up and quit, or do you figure out creative solutions? And not all of those were met with positive feedback. Sometimes it was like, well, we don't want to do that or whatever. But the willingness to continue to try to not just accept basic like no's for an answer and like figure out ways to get what you want. Or need rather. So I think things like that were important for me. And, I did Lafayette College in 21. I was volunteering as a quality control coach. And, did I love the 6 hours of sitting with the defensive staff and just talking about how bad our players are and trying, no, I would have rather been out like looking to find future players to get them. So I had to figure out ways to do different things to impact their, I started coming up with hit charts and different things to help the staff. So while maybe it wasn't all the things I wanted to be doing, I could guide it towards some other things that I had more ability towards and that kind of stuff.
Joe, we're running out of time here, but I do need to ask you about the role PFF played in your development. I think you spent 7 years with them, obviously concurrent to other jobs you had. Yep. How did that work? How did that even start? And what role did that play in kind of getting you where you are now?
Yeah, PFF, I think, is an awesome company. They, I answered, you see these things on LinkedIn, they're looking for data entry people. And I answered one in probably 2016. And I think I did one. The way they do it is they have basically an army of football nerds that are doing a lot of the grading and stuff, and they've trained them very specifically in all the different processes of the game. So they teach you it basically, and then they let you do a couple trial games and see where you fall. And somehow I slipped through the cracks, the first year, which actually worked out to my benefit because they kept me in the loop, but it opened up some doors to other things that I didn't have. Normally you do this for X amount of time and then you open up other opportunities. And so for me, like I got a little bit lucky. It was sort of like a glitch, and they allowed me to be on the advanced scouting team and the team that wrote, they called it NBC Notes, that wrote notes for Chris Collinsworth on air. So like he has his, a game, I forget what it's called, but basically like, hey, Jeremiah Trotter, these are facts about him. And so like, he knows all the things about the biggest guys, but like that right guard, you might not know everything about. So like we would try to find cool things for him. And the same with the advanced scouting stuff. It was, but it was as PFF was rolling out. I don't know if you guys are familiar with their Ultimate product. That's their like database system behind the scenes where if you're in an NFL building, like all of the scouts will have that pulled up and they click on a link and this will take them into their DV Sport or Catapult system to show video of that guy, or whether it's a pro scout, like whether they're doing scouting of other pros or whether they're doing college scouting. That's the holy grail of like access to all of it. And so this was when it was sort of, growing, and the advanced scouting thing was a way to get teams cool info, but also to learn more about what PFF can do for them. Yep. So like, very part-time for me, but it opened up some cool opportunities. Like I was writing notes and like I'd watch Sunday Night Football and Chris Collinsworth would say something and I gave him that note. Maybe he figured it out on his own too, but like I put it in there, which is kind of cool. Like as you're, coaching high school at some of those points, I was even doing it when I was working for Washington. It's a little bit of validation that like, hey, what I'm doing is catching on, even if it's something little like that. So it was kind of cool in 2020 when we played It was the last game of the season because I think they flexed our game against the Eagles because if we won, we make the playoffs at 7-9, and if we lost, the Giants were in. And Collinsworth was doing the game, but it was all COVID restrictions, so I had to figure out how I was going to meet him face to face because I hadn't really had the opportunity to. And everyone was secluded off, so I found a spot where I don't know how I figured it out, but I was like, he's going to be walking by here with whoever. What was his other announcer? Yeah. And Chris has Andy's Chris's right hand man. And they're over there. I see him and I go, "Hey, Chris." And they run away. He doesn't know me from anyone, but I was able to introduce myself. And then Andy was like, "Wait, who are you?" "Oh yeah, I remember your note." It was kind of a cool experience. Yeah. And then Michael was like, "How much is he paying you? I need someone to do this for me."
All right. So
it's been and I also got to do something on their special teams analysis side. So those are very quick games. Some of their processes are very long, and it takes a while to get good at those. And I probably wouldn't have survived if those were the only opportunities I had. And from that, I've been able to meet a lot of great people at PFF some have gone on to do cool things, and some are really building stuff there, like Brian Hall, Josh Wisniewski, and Tyler Phillips. Now I deal with a lot from being at different places because all of these FBS and FCS teams need PFF especially with transfer portal type stuff, to be able to access film.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we wrap up here, Joe, you're just getting started, just getting rolling in Laramie. Laramie's a great spot. Laramie is a different spot. Again, you get you just like so many places that kind of out in the Midwest, you get people that love it, your people that are looking to hit the high tail, head down to Denver, Colorado Springs, or whatever it is. If there's one thing you're really excited about that Cowboy football program, I've got a really close friend that coaches up there. Again, there's been a bunch of good players to come through. What's the one thing you're excited about Wyoming football this fall?
Oh, this fall. I haven't had a whole lot of chance to look at the roster. I'm excited at how excited the staff is, though. Coach seems like, Coach Lavo will even say that it feels like last year he had to go through some growing pains, and this year, now he knows what to do a little bit more as a second-year head coach, and they're pretty excited about the guys that have come in. And so far, most of the people I've met here have been super nice, super excited, and it's neat to be in a place where this is the thing. North Dakota was a cool experience, but you walk around and Sioux hockey was the thing, not North Dakota football. You go to Air Force and they care about football, but they're really being trained to be war fighters and a little bit different. Whereas here, this is the thing. As Cowboy football goes, people are happier. They're smiling a little bit more. And I like the attitude of a lot of people here that last year didn't go the way they wanted, and they could pout about it or they could do something about it. And it seems like everyone here, that's sort of a Midwest mountain grit type mentality that, hey, we're going to work and make sure it doesn't happen again. And they've had a lot of success here. And I think that they're, changing landscape of football, college football. They're at a critical point to where things are pivoting, especially with the Mountain West. As the Mountain West changes, a whole lot of opportunity out there for people, and whether it's this season or next season. So it's an exciting time here.
Yeah. I think that's a good, it may be a good title both for your story and for Wyoming football. If you want something, do something about it. And again, that is going to be the story for the Wyoming Cowboys this fall as well as for yourself. As we wrap up here, people are going to have questions again, whether it's about timelines, because I know Neil and I, I'm probably still going to be going back and all right, so I'm pretty sure this was the timeline. You can read again. There's some good articles out there, kind of detailing more of it. But if people have specific questions for you, want to get in touch, want to talk about Wyoming football, nursing, Air Force, whatever it may be, because you're going to get questions, no doubt about it. Where can people find you? Twitter, Instagram. Where are you at?
Yeah, Twitter is probably the easiest. Joe Lax, JOELAX. You can find me on LinkedIn too, but Twitter is probably the easiest. And feel free to hit me up. Anyone needs advice or not medical questions, I'm done with that. I feel like they should probably be directed to DeBrickashaw Ferguson at this stage.
Yeah, there we go. Well, that's rare company, big time NFL guys who have their nursing degree. Again, I coached for a short time at Case Western. They loved their male nurses. if for nothing else, they could move big patients when those
Yeah.
big offensive linemen came in. So,
Well, he's probably thinking he's going to get out of the physicality of the NFL. Wait till he's on a unit and half the nurses are pregnant and they're like, "Hey, where's the Brickashaw?" And
exactly.
they're like, "Hey, help me move this 400-pound patient." And they don't mean help; they mean you do it.
Yeah, no, quite. You can do it by yourself, Brick. Go get him. Well, Joe, this has been fantastic. We really appreciate it, and good luck to you, and good luck to Wyoming football this fall.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate all you guys do and the insight because there's so much behind everything's behind the shroud or curtains, and I think you guys really do a good job of shedding light on it and showing the personal side of it. And it's not something that's attainable. You don't just have to be born into it. There's a lot of different stories out there and a lot of different paths, and some might be more unique than others. We're not all 22 and have the ability to go into it for less, but I appreciate you guys and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you, man.
Agents, before we go, make sure you go check out Agent Live 360. It is at agentlive360.com for everything you need for your agency, from players to coaches, managing profiles, tracking invoices, sending invoices, getting paid, keeping up on every element of your entire agency. Notification emails, file folder storage, ROI, transactions, invoices, calendar, contracts, teams, reps, everything all in one spot for you. That is Agent Live 360. Hop on, request a demo. Yours truly will hop on, walk you through it. I can promise you we will talk some football as well. Sign up now with code TRIAL90 for a 90-day, 3-month trial at just $10 a month for Agent Live 360. That's at agentlive360.com. Go check it out now.